Welcome everyone to ECN. It's great to have so many of you here. Well, the good news is that ECN is growing. We are over 110 members now. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, ECN was formed in November 2020 to support senior marketing professionals. We wanted to create an open and honest platform where we could share ideas and connect and support each other. The idea being that we would be stronger if we worked together, that we could learn from each other's successes, but also mistakes, and that nothing like that existed before. So if you're joining us for the first time, you are very welcome. And if you would like to join the network, you can email my colleague Lulu, and her email will be coming up in the chat. So today it's a special ECN because we are launching our research report that looks at teachers' social media habits and their attitudes to influencers and their consumption of podcasts. Some quick housekeeping before we start. We're recording this session. Add your questions to the chat and we'll try and cover as many as we can. Remain on mute and keep your video on if possible. So first, Anna Pedrosa is going to share some of the key findings from the research report. Anna's been closely involved in producing the research, and I should add that Jess Shepherd has also provided valuable input, including some very useful and important proofing. Thanks to both of them. Anna's briefing will be followed by a panel where we will discuss the implications of research for education marketing and comms professionals, and I'm delighted to welcome Buki Youssef, who's a school leader and leadership coach, Jodie Lopez, who's an EdTech marketing expert and former primary school teacher, and Gronya Hallahan, who's a senior analyst at TES and also a former teacher. So, kicking off the research, Anna helped, many of you will recognise her. Anna helps to coordinate ECN, but she also runs Pedrosa Comms, which is an education specialist consultancy that helps organisations to amplify their message to schools, early years and beyond. Anna's worked with me on the research gathering, analysis and writing the report, and she is the best person to share some of the findings because she knows it inside out. Welcome, Anna, and thank you for agreeing to present the research findings.
Thanks very much, Susan. Hello, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm going to take you through a few of the highlights of the research, as Susan mentioned. I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me a moment. Great, let's start. So, what we wanted to understand with the research, a number of different questions with regard to social media. What were educators using? How were they using social media when they were in work mode? What kind of, how trustful were they of social media platforms? Which platforms were most popular? And what kind of content, education-related content, were they looking for on social media? So those were our main questions. But we also asked about educators, how they felt about influencers and also their consumption of education-related podcasts. And I'm going to give you a bit of a run through all of those points. Also, the research, when did we do it? Well, the survey, it was a big survey of over 5,000 educators, you can see listed there, and across primary and secondary, and a mixture of both state-funded and independent sector schools, but primarily everyone respondents were those in state-funded schools. We worked with Teacher Tapp on the surveying, which was done in December. And we also used two of their back catalogue questions because they had previously, earlier in 2022, asked teachers about their social media use. So we also used a couple of those questions. It's really useful if you're working with TeacherTapp to find out what their back catalogue questions are, because they're quite a bit cheaper than asking a question for Fresh. So, firstly, we asked respondents about their general use of social media. We asked them, thinking of the time you've spent on social media in the past week, which of the following have you done? And you can see here that liking and favoriting things was the most likely activity people were going to be doing, followed closely by keeping up to date and accessing news. Remember, in this context, keeping up to date might just be the football rather than anything to do with education. However, something that was particularly interesting, though, is finding resources. That was in 4th position. These respondents here, we were asking them what they use social media for when they weren't in work mode, generally. And even so, educators were looking for resources. So I think that was particularly interesting. We then turned to asking educators about their use of social media in work mode. What were the activities they had been doing? What platforms had they been used when they were using social media for work? So you can see that Twitter is the most dominant platform, but also that 17% are not using any social media for work-related activities. I think that's really important to bear in mind. Splitting that data up now by role, so the navy blue is classroom teacher, the red is middle leaders, the blue is senior leadership team, and the yellow is head teachers. We see some other pictures emerging. The role really impacts on social media use. So looking at those who said they don't use any, we can see that the largest number of those were classroom teachers rather than others in leadership roles of one sort or another. And we can also see that senior leaders, head teachers in particular, are the biggest users of Twitter and WhatsApp. And also, interestingly, LinkedIn, which was a platform not used very much when we looked generally, we can see head teachers, quite a few of them, about 18%, had used LinkedIn in the past week. We also asked them about what kind of activities they were doing when they were on social media for work-related activities. No surprise here to finding resources as the most popular. But it's interesting to see that keeping up to date is also an important activity. Although likes and favoriting, which had been the top rank for general use of social media, gets pushed down to 4th position here. What was interesting about finding resources is that when we looked by role and broke it down, for classroom teachers, it was even higher. It was at 32%, whereas for head teachers, it was only 7%. For those that had less than 5 years, 34% reported that finding resources had been the thing they had done. They were most likely to do. In terms of head teachers, though, they're much more likely to be keeping up to date and accessing news. The average was 20%. Head teachers reported, 35% of head teachers reported that this was the activity that they did most often on social media. Classroom teachers said it was about, only 18% reported that it was the thing they were most likely to do. And head teachers also were more likely to be reading blogs and extended posts. Now, looking at that same data, but breaking it down by subject, you can see there are some interesting strands. So we've got the main subjects here: English, maths, science, core subjects, humanities, languages, arts, including design and technology, other, including PE, and then early years, EYFS, Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So it's a bit of a rainbow chart, but take a look at the report and you'll be able to see this in more detail. So the interesting thing here is really English teachers. Look how many of them are accessing resources compared to science teachers. And this shows how, by breaking data down, we can discover so much more than we can find out just by looking at that top level stat. Also, another example, languages and science teachers much more likely by some way to be reading blogs or extended posts. However, in other areas, such as keeping up to date or accessing news, there's much less difference in terms of what's happening. So it's not always the case that it's going to be an interesting breakdown. So what does it all mean for us in terms of social media platforms? Well, Twitter and Facebook are still dominant compared to Instagram or TikTok, where we might see dominance if we were looking at consumer stats. WhatsApp is also really popular, obviously harder for marketing and comms people to use, but interesting to know that that is an important platform. And there's lots of variety in behaviour when we dig into the role, seniority or subject. So it does pay to always target and to do research in order to understand a bit more about your audience. Otherwise, you could be firing off, launching big social media campaigns, confident of reaching an audience when maybe actually only a smaller proportion are going to be using that platform. We then looked at trust in social media, and this was really interesting. Look at the dominance of Twitter. We asked, which social media platform do you trust most for education-related content? Important to bear that in mind. The question was about education-related content. But that was still surprising. 58% reported trusting Twitter most. And in second position, 17%, almost a fifth again, said that they didn't trust social media for education-related content. Another fascinating and really puzzling figure was this one about Facebook, 12%. That's a very small number. We weren't sure why that was the case. Could it be that, the quality of the content that's shared on Facebook, or the fact that a lot of teachers belong to closed groups? Maybe they think of those differently. We weren't sure, but maybe the panel or the rest of the audience can give us some insights or thoughts on that, maybe through chat, or the panel maybe can address it when they're discussing some of the findings from this research. Anything else to add here? I think the only other bit is LinkedIn and WhatsApp are really low on trust, but I think it's very important to bear in mind that we asked a question about education-related content. Those platforms are not really going to be the places that you go for education-related content. It's either going to be communicating and messaging, or it's going to be actually maybe something career-focused or recruitment-focused. Let's have a look at Twitter and Facebook in a bit more detail and I'll break down. So here's what's happening in Twitter when we look at subjects. You can see the core subjects are the ones where we've got the heaviest number of people using Twitter for education-related content. And in general, secondary teachers are more likely to use Twitter than primary educators. However, we also have this dip here, which is for those for art, design and technology teachers. And we weren't sure why that was, other than the fact that we presumed that Twitter was just not a particularly helpful platform when you were looking for art, design and technology content. And in fact, the Facebook slide coming up will give a bit more detail in a minute. Just also breaking down on Twitter in terms of roles. You can see again the fact that leadership roles are trusting Twitter more for education-related content. We speculated that that might be because it was also leadership roles who were more likely to be using social media to keep up to date with news. And of course, Twitter is a useful medium for that. So we wondered if that was one of the reasons. Going on to Facebook, and you can see that here art, design and technology teachers are dominant, much more so than the core subjects. So it looks to us as if why we see this is because the quality of the content, Facebook is just a better source of content if you're an art and design teacher. So despite the turmoil at Twitter HQ, it does appear that Twitter is the most trusted platform for education-related content. And if you are wanting to promote education content, then Twitter is a really useful platform, particularly for English, maths and science teachers and for SLT. Educators appear to be less likely to trust Facebook for education-related content, but there are exceptions, as we've seen. So art teachers and also primary. LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, less likely to be trusted for education-related content. However, those platforms can still be useful for engaging teachers or school leaders on other topics, for instance, professional development or career development on LinkedIn. Now, turning away from social media, we ask those two extra questions, one about the role of education influencers and another about consumption of education-related podcasts. We asked our respondents what makes an education influencer authentic. And what was clear was that educators really value influencers who are still teaching in school and that use their platform for good. Influencers still teaching in school were also more important for those early in their career or for younger educators, younger respondents. Interestingly, though, the number of followers was not nearly as much of a priority, which surprised me because, of course, as a comms professional, digital reach is a really important consideration. But for teachers and educators, less so. So it's about quality rather than quantity for trusting education influencers, for finding people who are authentic and are going to appeal to educators. Direct experience in school is really important to emphasize. And ideally, the influencer should still be teaching in school. Something I didn't point out on the graph, but almost a fifth, said that influencers were not really relevant to them, or they couldn't answer the question. So as with other slides in this, we have to accept that about a fifth of people are not going to be engaging with education influencers at all. And although size of following matters a lot to marketing and comms people, it matters much less to whether an educator is going to feel that an influencer is authentic. Now, moving on to podcasts, we asked, if you listen to education podcasts, what type of content do you like? Well, it was clear that actually a very large number were not listening to education podcasts at all. And that this is really quite an emerging area for kind of what we might call traditional kind of media consumption. Subject-specific podcasts were the most likely to be listened to, and EdTech the least likely. But there's some other interesting findings when you break this down by seniority. So you can see that actually the number of head teachers who don't listen to podcasts is much lower at 43% than the 61% for classroom teachers. They are also, you can see, middle leaders are also the ones that are most interested in career development and professional development. And unsurprisingly, head teachers are most likely to be wanting to listen to podcast content that is linked to leadership. I think I've already covered most of these points in the previous slide, so I'm going to move on because time is ticking. Just wanted finally to share some points around some different roles. One of the things we discovered in the research as we were analysing the data was that there were three groups that stood out as being distinctly different and having different qualities. And the first was head teachers. So just to run through some interesting things that we discovered. more likely to be on social media, particularly Twitter and WhatsApp, bigger users of LinkedIn than anyone else, 16% versus 5%, most likely to be using social media to keep up to date or to read blogs and extended reads. They trust social media, Twitter in particular, for education-related content more than classroom teachers do. And they're more likely to listen to podcasts than classroom teachers and middle leaders, particularly if those podcasts are about leadership. For early years and Key Stage 1, this audience are the group of people who are most likely to be using social media to find resources. EYFS and Key Stage 1 also use Facebook much more than others, and they're the highest users of Pinterest and Instagram. However, overall, Twitter is still the dominant platform to engage with them with. So it's just that there's a greater diversity of platforms that they're using. Their trust in Twitter is a little lower, but it increases but their trust in Instagram and Pinterest as more regular users is higher. And they're most likely to listen to podcasts about teacher well-being and support. Finally, men and women. Well, men prefer using Twitter for work-related activities, and women also use Twitter a great deal. They make greater use of other social media. Facebook, 34% of women use Facebook compared to men, 23%. For Instagram, it's a small number, 12%, but only 6% of men are using Instagram. And they are more likely to trust Facebook and Instagram and TikTok than men, although men are more likely to be trusting Twitter. 66% reported trusting Twitter for education-related content compared to women at 55%. And finally, more women than men believe that education influencers are authentic when they work in a school or a multi-academy trust. So some really big contrasting behaviours. Just to summarise and finish up then, teacher resources continues to be a dominant aspect of why teachers and educators are on social media, even when they're not in work mode. The broad trends give us some of the information, but actually there's quite a lot going on when we cut data, but when we look at subject specialisms, phases or experience. So it's important to get to know your particular audience when you're using social media to ensure you're targeting them where they actually are, where they're going to, and with content that they're actually going to find interesting. They're different to consumers. Here, Twitter is still the dominant platform. Instagram and TikTok are minority interests compared to Twitter. May well continue to change, but at least at the moment, that's the case. And for educators, it's about trusting other educators. The size of the following of an influencer is not going to impress them nearly as much as whether they are still in school and walking the talk. And finally, although there are hundreds of education podcasts, that doesn't in any way mean that educators are actually listening to them. Some are, and if you want to reach senior leaders and head teachers, then podcasts could be a great way to reach them, but not everybody. Thanks very much. Are there any questions?
That was really interesting, and there's a lot to take in there. So don't worry, we weren't expecting you to retain all of that. We will be sharing the full report and Anna's slides afterwards. And if you have questions, you will be able to email those in. So Anna, we've covered teacher media habits. We've covered teacher social media habits. Where do you think we should go next?
Oh, interesting. Well, if we were doing something else, I think further education would be a really interesting audience to take a look at, Susan. or alternatively early years. We saw it a little bit in the breakdown there with early years and Key Stage 1. I'd love to know more about the early years sector. It's a huge priority for the government, and also I think we're going to see quite a lot of talk about early years in the election. And so it feels like a workforce which would be great to have more intelligence around.
I've just got a couple of questions. Sal asked, how big was the sample?
Depends on the question, Sal, but anything from 5,000 up to about 7,000 for different questions.
And Victoria, don't worry, we're going to come to hashtags in the discussion later. And we were going to ask the panel that. And there's lots of comments and things where people are reacting to things that they are surprised about, or they are saying, yes, I can see that. I think now would probably be a good time to welcome our panel so that we can reflect on this research in more detail. So I'd like to introduce Buki Youssef. Now, Buki is a senior leader at Edith Cay School, and she has worked across both mainstream and special schools. She's well known through her Twitter handle at Rondell10_B. And she's also an author and a leadership coach. Beyond the classroom, Buki is recognised for her EdTech expertise, and she's co-chair of the EdTech Leadership Group, as well as co-host for a monthly show about EdTech developments. Welcome, Buki. Jodie Lopez is an award-winning primary school teacher who has received recognition for her use of technology in the classroom and beyond. Following 6 years in teaching, she joined Pearson, where she launched their Champion Schools programme. Jodie now combines her expertise to support EdTech companies and has worked with PTOP, Too Simple, Night Zookeeper, and Third Space Learning, amongst others. She continues to be closely involved with teachers and her local primary school. Welcome, Jodie. And finally, Gronya Hallahan. Gronya is part of the editorial team at TES, where she's senior analyst working closely with Dan Worth. Before joining TES, Gronya was a secondary English teacher for 10 years, and she has experience of teaching GCSE and A-level classes. Welcome to all of you. So I just wanted to start really by getting your reflections on the research. So I'll come to you first, Gronya. What stood out to you? Any surprises there?
So I thought it was really, really interesting to hear about the use, particularly of head teachers, and what they were, the fact that they were more on LinkedIn. And what occurred to me when I speak to head teachers about their use of social media, they often say that they use it for advertising jobs, trying to promote their school and trying to get teachers and attracting teachers. We know that teacher recruitment's a huge challenge at the moment for school leaders. And when I saw the results of the survey, I thought, haha, this makes sense, because that's what I'm hearing from leaders saying, that they want out of their social media engagement. They want to project a positive image of their school, and they want to be able to share opportunities for teachers to come and work with them. So I thought that was particularly interesting. I also thought the point about English teachers looking for resources, when we think about the huge curriculum changes that the subject of English has faced over the last few years and continue to do so, they're still adding books onto what can be taught for the current GCSE syllabus. Changing a class novel requires a huge amount of work from a department point of view. So it makes sense that they're the ones that are more likely to be looking for resources, because of course, new novel, you've got to figure out the novel and get all the resources for it and plan for it and talk to other teachers about, hey, I'm teaching this, are you teaching this? Have you got any tips for me? And that way of sort of networking beyond your own school. You need to speak to people outside your normal groups. Social media is perfect for that. I also thought the point about trust was really interesting. So the idea that Facebook has low trust ratings, but still people use it a lot. This is something that Anna and I discussed before, and I put that to some of the groups of teachers that I speak to, and they said that they felt, although there is a lot of stuff on Facebook that they take, they can sort of see, oh, you know, this isn't actually a very good resource, or perhaps that doesn't align with what the current thinkings are on how best to deliver that topic, etc., etc. They felt that they were still in a position to be able to discern what was good and what was bad. So although there's sort of low trust in it as a platform, actually teachers are thoughtful, professional people who can say, right, that's not so good, I'm not gonna click on that, I'm not gonna look at that, but this is brilliant. So although it's sort of low trust, there's high quality stuff that is on there, and they felt that they were, you know, well positioned to pick out what's useful and what's not useful. Oh, and the other thing I thought was interesting was Twitter not being so popular for art teachers. And I think when I spoke to a few art teachers about this, and they said that they felt that the other platforms like Pinterest and Facebook, where you've got more opportunities to explain what you mean visually, that suited them much better. On Twitter, they were saying that the way that the pictures go in, sometimes they're too small, you can't really tell a story, you can only add like 4 to 1 tweet, you get into a thread, it gets complicated, you lose track of the whole thread. So it just doesn't lend itself to that kind of communication that they wanted to have with other fellow art teachers. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, those are the main things that I thought were all surprising, or yes, that makes sense from that data.
Thanks, Grainne. Bookie, I'm going to come to you next. What were your reflections on the research?
Interesting. Anything to do with social media, obviously, I'm a fan of. I wasn't surprised to see the fact that you've got 25, I think it's about 25% of educators who don't use social media at all. And I think that's something that we really need to tap into. I think what struck me was about leadership, listening to podcasts. Now, I think during the last few years, there's been like so many different types of podcasts out there. So it's just interesting to hear about who's listening to podcasts, because I know I agree with you in the fact that it's still an emerging platform, and there's just so many out there. I think unless you get signposting from people that you trust in terms of their judgment, they may have similar educational philosophies of you in terms of what they recommend, you can get lost in the midst. So I'd be interested to hear more about the podcasts that school leaders listen to, and why, what they're gaining from it.
Thank you. And Jodie, how about you?
Well, similar to Grainne in the sense that a lot of it just kind of validates and explains a lot of the anecdotal things you think. And I think that's where something like a research piece like this is really interesting, because we do all I'm sure loads of people on this call, and you can see in the chat, have concepts and perceptions based on what we all do on social media ourselves, but we can really then pick out these kind of peaks and troughs between different behaviours. And I think, as with Grainne, I was not surprised by Art and DT and MFL preferring other platforms to Twitter, because languages was my specialism pre-technology, and definitely for languages, again, Facebook just lends itself more to being able to do a live, being able to set up more of the conversational chats that kind of fit well with that. So that kind of reinforces being on the right platform with the right content is really, really important. I think that's something we kind of know in our own behaviours, but have to kind of consciously think about when we're approaching marketing. And the other one I found really interesting, and again fits with the Twitter algorithm release quite interestingly, when they made some of that transparent. I noticed that there's a higher amount of teachers who are liking by far than responding. Now, normally when we're thinking from a marketing and sales point of view, we're always talking about trying to get communication and get two-way communication and build a relationship. But we can see there that actually the relationship for a lot of teachers and a lot of school leaders is just to like things, whether that's bookmarking, agreeing, or however they're using their likes, because that can vary as well. But in the Twitter algorithm, if you get a like, it's worth a lot more than a reply on Twitter. So actually that feeds into those behaviors then, that actually if we can value likes rather than constantly trying to drive a conversation, maybe we don't need to constantly be trying to get replies, and actually putting things out there that people appreciate and can take and just you know, click a like on if they like it and save it for later is really valuable. So I thought that was really interesting.
Thank you. That is really interesting. And I think as marketing professionals, you are looking for that more of a back and forth. And that's a very useful thing to know. Bukky, I'm going to come to you as a school leader. Can you share a little bit about when and how you use social media yourself?
Okay, thank you. I'm just reflecting on this. In November, I'll be using Twitter. I started up with Twitter for 10 years. And so when I started Twitter, didn't have a clue what I was doing, sending out, you know, tweets and things like that. I felt as though I was in a ghost chamber because nobody responded. What I found helped me is actually following people who initially had resources and were similar subjects to me. So I have a science subject specialism, followed science teachers, educators. And I found that what I thought was useful in terms of maybe resources, people to follow, all kinds of things, I would actually share and retweet that. And that is slowly how I actually built up my following. But then I dabbled a little bit in Pinterest. And I think as a visual, I gravitate towards it, but didn't get much out of it. So Pinterest came and went for me. I dabbled in LinkedIn, I dabbled in Instagram, and also YouTube as well. More recently, I've dabbled in Facebook and also TikTok. Now, I'm one of those type of people that I have an attention span like my students. It can be just grabbed by little things. TikTok I actually use, but I actually just follow people for specific things. So if it's a specific thing that I want to actually look at, I'd actually jump onto the platform and get off. I still actually engage more heavily on Twitter because that's where I spent my time making connections. And I think in terms of the trust, that's where they're built. So for example, if I wanted to say, like, for example, look at a book or a podcast or someone to follow, I would actually reach out to my networks and say, this is a type of, you know, who would be interested, you know, who would be a good person to follow or read and things like that. It's also spread out to some of the communities I've engaged with, say like BAME and Twitter, not BAME, Women Ed and SLT Chat. Part of SLT Chat meant that I actually was co-hosting Sunday chats where we actually got online for 30 minutes on Sunday evening to talk about lots of different things in relation to education. I went on to Instagram and LinkedIn because even predating who now owns LinkedIn, Twitter, it became a little bit rowdy. There were lots of arguments, debates, which I think detracted from all the good that was actually taking place within education. And I just wanted somewhere where I could actually learn from different people, because the questions I still ask myself are, what's in it for me and my school? Working in special school, there are specific things I need to look for. Who can I learn from? And who understands my context? So I've now seen that more educators are on, say, for example, LinkedIn, because it gives an opportunity to promote type of things they're doing, maybe training they're leading on, or training they've attended, books they've read, and things like that. And it doesn't seem to be as contentious, even though it's great and energetic on Twitter. I just think that it's a calmer experience than some of the other platforms. And that's just a very brief overview of how I've engaged with social media over the years.
Okay. Is there a time of day that you tend to be more active?
Evenings when I've got the headspace, and occasionally during the weekend, although what I find now is that unless there are very specific things that I want to look at, I might literally just go on for about 50 minutes and then come off. I tend to, I spend more time in the evenings and weekends on Instagram and LinkedIn, because you can just look at things for your leisure and find things, and I think have deeper conversations as well.
Okay, thank you. So this is a question for Gráinne. How does TES use social media to talk to teachers and other professionals working in schools?
So I'll answer how I use TES to talk to teachers. So sometimes we're looking for comments on a piece, or if I'm looking for something very, very specific, like, for example, recently I was doing a piece about teachers who thought about leaving the classroom, changed their mind, and then took on a different job in a different school. That's a very like specific group of teachers I needed to speak to. And I reached out in my own networks and spoken to some people, but I needed more. So I took to Twitter and my inbox quickly filled up. I had loads of replies really quickly, and I was able to speak to the people I needed to speak to. So for that sense, it's really, really useful. It's also good to listen to particular trends, like see if you think about the pattern of the school year, we go through these cycles in education. We have times when teachers are really interested in exam results. We have times when teachers are really interested about preparing for exams. We have that induction transition period when the new year 7s are coming up and the little ones are about to start school, all those different points in the school year. And we can use social media, and I use social media to find out, something particularly bothering schools this year, teachers sharing their experiences and saying, look, this is a really good example. After the pandemic, I discovered from listening to teachers talking on Facebook and Twitter that there was an issue with using scissors in early years. And it's something that we looked at in more detail, and it leads to writing pieces that we know people are interested in reading about and are focusing on issues that are current in schools at that time. So it's a really good way of like working out what's a current issue for schools. I spend a lot of my time going into schools and visiting schools and talking to teachers, but the great thing about social media is you've got lots of people all at once sharing stuff that you perhaps wouldn't in a workplace, or perhaps wouldn't think this is actually really important on a grander level. You can sort of see patterns emerging, and it's really useful for that. In terms of TES magazine, we've got a Twitter account that's got 362,000 followers, and I think from the survey, one of the points I thought was really interesting was that 59% of teachers are using social media because they want to be up to date. Well, yes, we know they do, because we have huge interactions with our TES Twitter account, and people want to know what's going on. And like I said before about that pattern of the school year, we can see that they're interested in teachers. And when I talk to leaders, they say, when it's exams time, I've got the TES account on alert, and I want to see what's the news with the exam results. Are the results that I've got in my school mirroring that other people across the country have had? We've had an awful nightmare with GCSE language, as everyone else, and it's really useful to make sure that leaders and teachers feel it's useful to make sure that they're gauging what's happening in their school against the national picture. Who's this most important for? When I speak to leaders in rural communities or in schools where they draw students from a really big radius around them, those are the ones that that tell me the most, that they most emphatically how much they use social media, because they don't have those real life connections like relationships with other head teachers, because there aren't that many around them. So I think maybe that connects the LinkedIn with leaders numbers, perhaps, that they are finding their fellow peers through social media, because people that do work in more remote communities don't have that, or ask the head who works down the road, because there is no head down the road.
Just thinking about how much time that social media saves. Like before Twitter, how were people able to keep in touch? Were they like phoning each other? Were they like having to come together physically to meet, to share this kind of information? It's done. We can get all of this now without even leaving our desk or our office. Jodie, wanted to ask the same question to you. How do you use social media to talk to teachers?
So, well, I have I have a couple of mainstreams that I use as myself, and then I am ghostwriter for lots of clients' tweets and various different things on different social media as well, which varies hugely depending on who they are, because I think that's really important, is for brands to kind of know where their correct audience is, and this kind of insight from the research is really good for that, to kind of back up the fact that I keep telling them things, and luckily most of it seems to agree, which is good. But for me, I've used Twitter for a very long time. So I joined Twitter in 2009, which I didn't intend to use from a teacher point of view. And I think this is a really important point around where people are and what they do. Is it is much easier to be anonymous on Twitter. than it is on Facebook. People can follow you, they can see exactly who you are and all your details on Facebook, and it's much harder to have an anonymous account and be very open. So if you are worried your senior leadership team are watching who you're interacting with, which divisive conversations you're on, then Twitter is a lot easier for that. And I originally was on Twitter as just a person. I was a teacher, but I wasn't really doing Twitter for that. I had my Facebook with all my teacher friends on. And then I joined in 2009. I was just chatting to kind of celebrities and entering competitions, because it was back when hardly anyone was there and you could talk to anyone and they would talk back to you. And then I was featured in an article in TES in 2010, and suddenly loads of teachers found me. And I thought Jodie World was fairly, like, World is not my surname, despite the amount of emails I still get to Miss World. They'd be very disappointed. But they, you know, so I was just Jodie World, and then suddenly everyone just found me, even though TES didn't link to my Twitter at all. And so then I thought, oh no, I've got to start acting professional. And that changes your behavior and your mindset into what you're now doing on Twitter. And Twitter's still the place where I connect with teachers, with classroom teachers. But to be honest, I mostly use that as a research base. That's how I know what teachers are talking about. That's how I know what's going on in the teaching world and what's important and what people's reactions are to whatever the government is saying or whatever's in the media or whatever policies are changing. That's where I'm really kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of what's happening in classrooms. It would never be where I sell my work as EdTech Ninja work, because it's not appropriate for me to do that there. But because, as you say, I'm still working, I do work with local schools for free, and I also am a judge for the Teaching Awards. And so there are various things I do share for free via Twitter, like I'll do videos telling teachers about EdTech that I use in the classroom, and a podcasting lesson I might have done yesterday. So anything like that I share on Twitter. On LinkedIn, that is where I will share EdTech advice. I do videos. Video's my thing, even though I've never really got into Instagram and TikTok. But I find putting my videos on LinkedIn is a really easy way of engaging. Bear in mind, I started my freelance work when I had a brand new baby and a toddler. And I just found blogging and writing was really difficult when you've got children on you. But doing a video on the school run or the nursery run or just out with the pram while they're asleep was really easy. So that became a thing that I did via different social platforms, was to share videos. But on Twitter, I very much talk about teaching and classroom practice and what is happening in the classroom with technology. And on LinkedIn is my business page, if you like. That's where I will talk about what I do, hopefully help EdTechs with the free videos, but also it's essentially where I'm saying I'm available for hire, which I wouldn't do on Twitter because it's not appropriate. And I think that balance for me is really interesting. And I think answers to what Nick was talking about, personas in different places. I do not use Facebook for professional use at all, although I have connections that I've moved from Twitter into Facebook because we've met in person. And then LinkedIn is my business. Twitter is my, here is me engaging still as a heart of a teacher, although knowing when I am not in a classroom now and I shouldn't step into the debate. And then Facebook is where I go and have a chat and a moan and a vent sometimes. So I definitely use different things, although I think my personality is pretty much the same across all three.
That's really interesting. So one of the questions that someone's asked already, favorite hashtags. I'm going to come to all of you with this one, because I think lots of us post social media a lot, but trying to decide you can't post hundreds of hashtags. So we've got to make sure the hashtag we're using is the right one, the appropriate one, and potentially a popular one. What are your go-to hashtags, Jodie? While you're here, I'll ask you that.
So yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd reiterate what you just said about not posting hundreds of hashtags. It's something I get asked a lot actually from clients, is, you know, which hashtags can I chuck over everything? But actually it's one of the biggest mistakes is to just throw hashtags into everything on certain social medias. It's much more acceptable on Instagram to kind of do loads of hashtags, and there's lots of and you want to kind of have a I like the rule of three, where you kind of 3 very generic, 3 a bit more targeted, and 3 very targeted on something like Instagram, and kind of 1 of each of those on LinkedIn. But there are some great hashtags on Twitter for finding the right people and finding teachers and finding what they're talking about. So Primary Rocks is a great one for finding primary teachers. UK EdChat is a great place to find what people are talking about on EdTech. But you'll also find that one has been gradually overtaken with advertising, because the people who originally set it up aren't as active. And that's where it can get a bit dangerous, because then people just won't follow it anymore, and because they just see it as broadcasting. And you want to find the ones where people are actually chatting, so you can get involved in the talk. But whenever they run a UK EdChat talk, which might be kind of 8 till 9 on an evening, and you can join that, then that's when you get that genuine connection with the people using that hashtag. MFL Twitterati, again, a languages one, because I'm still interested in languages. Kidlit, which is, I'll drop all these into the chat, by the way, but Kidlit is all around reading, kids literature, essentially. So these are really targeted ones. So if you have got a reading app, for example, you know, it's finding the right community and the right place to go, but then following the people within that community. I wouldn't say just use the hashtag all the time. I'd say use it to research and find out what people are interested in and find the people. And EY Talking, which is a great one for early years. So those I'll drop into the chat, but they're all ones where you're just finding the right community for those different things.
Bookie, can I ask you for your go-to hashtags?
Yes. Predictably, hashtag EdTech covers a lot of different things. I also have Women Ed hashtag and BAME Ed. I work with middle and senior leaders, you know, diverse representation in that regard. Teacher 5 a day. So I'm also involved in wellbeing as well. So Teacher 5 a day is a really good one. But I agree with what Jodie said about not putting lots and lots of hashtags in. What I suggest is actually including tagging people into specific threads, because I know, you know, like for my connections about what they're engaged with. So it could be leadership, it could be to do with pedagogy, it could be to do with professional development. There's a whole range of things I'm actually involved with. And I ask them a specific question so that it gets them engaged, or by tagging them in, I know that they're going to share it with their networks. And I think that's the key thing. I also, what I tend to do is when I have posts that are either shared with me or I actually put out on many of the platforms, predominantly LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter, I share it with my non-social media platforms, because there are still educators I'm connecting with who, doesn't matter what I say, they are not going to use social media, but I know there's a lot of great things out there that they need to be aware of. So I'm part of a variety of different WhatsApp groups looking at diverse leadership, and so I'd often post you know, like share links to posts that I've either posted or people that may approach me and say, this will be, you know, like, could you share this with your networks, and I'll do it that particular way. But I think the hashtags for me have died down over the way, because, you know, like you've got some people that I follow on Instagram who turn around and say, you know, hashtags are dead. So I think it's not about the hashtag. Obviously use the relevant ones where I know, for example, they're being used in particular posts or tweets and things like that, but it's the people I tag in that can actually gain traction and engagement as well.
Yeah, really good point about the tagging. Ronya, do you use certain hashtags as your go-to? It's hard, isn't it? When I know it depends on what you're posting about, but they're the things that you need to have them close to hand, especially if you're using, like, you're on the train and you can't look things up.
I would exclusively only use hashtags if I'm linking to something that's like an official event that's happened, or like the Education Summit, for example, like that kind of event that's going on, or if I'm at a conference, or exams, and that's it. I don't touch hashtags other times. And I remember back before I did what I do now, back when I was still in the classroom, I used to help run the Team English new teachers account. And we'd have people using the hashtag and @ing us. And it was so busy and we'd get so many notifications. We didn't even pay attention to the hashtags. We could only really realistically respond to people that @ed us, because it was just too much. And I don't think that when you've got like how little you can tweet, sometimes you're not always able to have the space to add the hashtag onto the end. So you know, you've got to think about that too. And so yeah, hashtags on Twitter aren't something that I've ever used. And I know, and I agree with Jodie with terms of Instagram and that rule of 3. That sounds like an excellent approach to take. I like the sound of that, because I think it's far more acceptable to have hashtags on Instagram, but still you don't want to overload them or just keep using the same ones, so making sure that you're specific to the audiences you want to talk to. But general hashtags that it might be useful to follow, I agree again with Jodie about the subject specific ones are really, really useful, like the Team English, and in particular is a really good one, and the CogSci for science. But again, I think the new ways that people are using Twitter, perhaps the lists and having lists of people, followers to follow, and organising the people that you want to follow into lists might be a good way for hunting down particular people, or checking to see what the conversations are about. Maybe using lists is a good way to use. It's a good thing to use instead of using hashtags.
Okay, thank you. And who are you following? Who do you recommend that everyone should follow in education, whose comments on the stories of the day, that's always got an opinion, or that is just generally entertaining? Who would you recommend that people follow?
Oh, Laura McInerney, she's fantastic. She's a brilliant person to follow. She's always got interesting perspectives and is open to discussing them, which is really helpful. She's somebody that if you had a question about something, she will reply to you. She's really thoughtful and open-minded in her replies. I've seen her discuss things with people and acknowledged, you know, oh yeah, that is a good point. You know, she's not somebody who's just stuck like, this is what I think, and that's I'm going to stand by it. Sam Friedman is also another excellent person to follow, and Laura and Sam both write for TES. Other good people, the Fisher Family Trust. Oh, they've got some brilliant people that blog for them that write about interesting trends that are coming out of education, and the data that they share is so valuable. And if you're thinking about, you know, what's emerging needs there are in the education market, they are the people that I would recommend that you should follow. Other good people to follow, there's like John Jerem. I'm trying to think what his handle is on Twitter. I always find the things that he shares really interesting. Education and Skills Think Tank, EdSec, EDSK, they also put out some really interesting reports. If you're interested in things that are emerging in education, things that will be important and we'll be discussing next year, they are really good people to follow. And of course, all the TES journalists. Why wouldn't you? You should be. I'm sure you're following us all already, but all of those people are really good to follow too.
Right, it's just made me think we should get everybody that's in the network that has a Twitter handle down and then circulate that so that at least everyone in the network is following each other and these people that you're recommending as well. Thank you. Jodie, who's on your must follow list?
Well, it's I'm going to go a bit controversial with mine, I think, because I think the people who are controversial are really interesting to follow for the reasons you said about kind of seeing what people are talking about. So probably top of the controversial list, it shouldn't be controversial because they do have a big following for good reason as well, but they do get into the divisive things, are people like Tom Bennett, who, because Tom is, you know, he gets into all sorts of different things, but if you want to know what policy is coming out, and importantly, how teachers are reacting to it, then you follow Tom's threads, because it's the way to kind of, you know, I wouldn't say go delving into those threads yourself and start getting into the divisive conversations, but, you know, he's going to post about what the government are doing and people are going to respond and see how they're responding to his reactions. And therefore you can really kind of get your foot in the water and see what people are talking about before you then do a blog on a particular subject, for example, or a new policy that's coming out. On the other end of that scale, so I'll go up to the progressive end and say Swales Ruth as well. It's actually Ruth Swales, who, again, if it's anything to do with early years, she will be talking about it. So I know a couple of people have asked about early years on here, and that's somebody to follow who's really in and I'm sure, Sal, you already do follow Ruth already on early years, but she will get into the divisive conversations on early years related practice, and she will definitely kind of talk about those things. So these are people who really will have the big conversations and the quite controversial conversations, and there's lots of blocking on both sides that will go on. But if you can stay out of it and just watch, again, from a research point of view, you will absolutely be on top of everything that's being talked about in education at the time. And then you've got people like Ceridwen Eccles, who talks about reading and creative teaching, and just with such passion. If you want to follow a teacher who is in her classroom practice and loving it and doing a really great job, then that is just, she is literally, her handle, she calls herself, you know, Teacher Glitter, and it's like she sprinkles glitter all over Twitter with all her different ideas and things. And then you've got Mr. T's NQTs. Again, I'll drop the hashtags in, because the @ in, because that's early career teachers, and I think it's really important. And I think we didn't see it on the PowerPoint today, but in the full report we can see the difference between the early career teachers and the further on teachers. And actually, I suspect, and I think the research bears this out, that the earlier on in the career, they just want instant resources. What can I teach tomorrow? Versus you're 10 years in, right, is retrieval practice the best thing I can introduce to my classroom? That's a huge difference in what kind of resources and debates we want to get involved in. Am I just planning on a Sunday night and I want something, or do I want to get into a debate? So there will be different behaviours. So I think following the NQT chat is a really interesting way to see what resources people are after. And then you've got people like Deputy Grocott, who's just got a huge following, and he posts everything from the frivolous to the really deeper meaning from policy stuff. But he gets debate going all the time, and he posts polls all the time, so you can see what people are thinking. So it's a quick, instant kind of a mini teacher tap, and it could be about CAPE, or it could be about, you know, what the policy is that's coming out. So those are kind of my 5 that I would say. But you know, there's 4,000 or so that I follow, so feel free to go through those of mine and Bucky's, and I'm sure Bronya's as well, if people to follow.
Bucky, have you got any?
Yeah, I mean, such a fabulous question. And Jodie, as you said, I follow 4,000 people, and you know, so feel free to follow them. But those that sprang to mind, Teacher Toolkit, Ross McGill, I mean, anything to do with regards to education, love him or love him or loathe him. And he has a little bit of pushback as well. So different discussions, you know, latest things about Ofsted. He is not afraid to go where the conversation needs to, and I love that. And he's prolific on Twitter as well as LinkedIn. Hannah Wilson, my friend, and someone who was actually linked to both BAME Ed and Women Ed, as well as LGBT Ed. So diversity is her very large umbrella, and she is the person, if you want to know about anyone, anything, any organization linked in whatever way to diversity, that is the person to know. Her following is huge because she knows a lot of different people and she networks for that specific reason as well. And I'll also add someone in, Dr. Jill Berry. Now, she is, I call her the queen of Twitter, very regal lady, but former head teacher, and she describes herself, I think, as a leadership consultant. But what she does is she reads things on tears, book reviews, anything and anything to do, anything and anyone, anywhere to do with education, and she writes them as praise phase, as threads. So if you don't have the time, because this is part of the problem, a lot of educators increasingly have the will but not the time. You want to follow people who can give things to you immediately and summarize. So that's the reason why things like Instagram I love, because you can have 60 seconds. If I can have something in 60 seconds, I would do it. She's great at actually summarizing it in threads. So those are the 3 people off the top of my head that I would definitely say to follow, and follow some of the people they follow as well.
Thank you. Anna, I'm going to come to you. Just, you've been following the chat. Are there any questions that I need to flag?
I think, Nick, your question about public versus business, personal, kind of feels like it's been covered to some extent. You're nodding. That's fantastic. Jess, I think you had a question which was about whether anyone on the panel could say anything about teachers using social media to engage with parents and carers. We've only got a few minutes, but I don't know if anybody has a few points, quick points to mention on that.
Ronya.
So I spoke to a head teacher who spoke. He works in a very difficult context. And we used these comments in a piece that I wrote about attendance and how you can help attendance in schools where you've got historically low levels of attendance and high levels of like long, not just, you know, taking the one or 2 days of what we call persistent absence, right? And he said that one of the ways that they overcame it was by using social media to engage with parents, to continually message, school is a fun place to be. Our school is open to you. We are welcoming you into our school. What you might have thought about our school in the past, because of a history of being a very poor school, and lots of the parents had attended the school themselves when they were younger and therefore had these negative impressions of the school when it was perhaps a bit more chaotic and wasn't quite so well run. Today, the school is different and it's a fun, lovely place to be. And if you don't come to school, you're going to have FOMO because we're having a great time here. And he had transformed the attendance at his school, and he attributed some of their success down to how well their comms team dealt with the social media. They put out all of their school newsletters and parent communications through every single social media platform. And he said that way you'll get all of them. I will send emails, we'll send letters, we'll send, we'll tweet stuff out. They put stuff out in a variety of different languages as well. And he said it was a really easy way to help non-English speakers in their community to engage with the school. And he was a huge advocate for using social media to show how fun school could be. And yeah, his Twitter account is hysterical. It's full of really, really funny videos and stuff that the staff do. And I can understand how it was such a successful policy for the school to take.
Great. Bookie, I'm coming back to you because I know that you've got a few more things that you wanted to say before the panel finishes. Did you want to?
Yes, just one point. Yeah, just one very brief point. It'll be really interesting to see how, in terms of teachers' use of social media, looking at special schools and alternative provision. And because they'll use it in a breadth and depth of different ways, but if you are looking to look at some of the issues now, like for example, there's a rise in mental health and all kinds of aspects, I think looking at special schools, SENCOs, alternative provision, I think Sarah Phoenix, or she was Sarah Dove, I'll share her name, is somebody who's a really good person to connect with. I mean, she also does her business as well in terms of consultancy, but for this particular reason. And I think that they sometimes can be missed out of the discussion to see how educators use social media.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you got any final points, Jodie, that you wanted to share before we move on?
No, I think, you know, the main thing that I think is coming across is about finding the channel and finding the audience, which I think you can't say enough probably in ed tech and education marketing is, you know, find the channel and understand the people on it and how they're using it. And I think this research is just really valuable for that.
Well, thank you. So thank you to our panel. And we've got just a few things before we wrap up for this session. So for any of you that have joined us for the first time and would like to be part of our network, please email Lulu. Lulu, can you put your email address in the chat? We meet once a term online. We try to meet once a year in face-to-face, but we're a funny bunch. We tend to, since COVID, this is just a much easier way to bring everybody together. So we don't send lots and lots of updates. We send one after each session with a link so that you can watch again, and we promote the next session. So you won't be getting lots of spam from us. The date for our next meeting is Tuesday, the 4th of July, and we're thinking about options of what we're going to cover in that event. So I wanted to launch the poll. Lulu, are you listening? Can you launch the poll? Yes. So we've got a few options, and I wanted to get you to vote on things that you're interested in so that we can take a look at that and see what we can do for the next few sessions. So if you can vote in the poll, that would be great. It's the first time we've done a poll. Very excited about this use of technology. I don't like using things that I don't understand, but we're going with it. In the meantime, while you're completing the poll, if anyone's got any job adverts that they would like to share, please send them in to me or Lulu, and we'll add them into the update, the follow-up to this. We'll just like list them there with the link so that people can see them. I know that there's a number of people that are looking for marketing coordinators, very hard to come by. So if you want to send me those, we can promote them across the network and also on our LinkedIn. But otherwise, I think...
Oh, Susan, do you want to just give the results of the poll quickly?
Oh, results of the poll. Yes, very important.
Do you want me to
Okay,
do
so it's looking like AI and its impacts on education comms is coming out top, followed by SEO, and then securing speaking opportunities. I couldn't put all of our options, Anna, on because there's a limit. So I ditched you and added managing crisis because I know that that was a big one. But if it's okay with you guys, we'll add this as like an extra thing on our session so that we can make sure that we're giving you the content that you are interested in. So it looks like AI. Anna, we'll have to take that away.
Yeah.
Or can I share the results? Yes, share. Can you see? Can everyone see that?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very exciting. So we'll take that away with us and see if we can source some speakers. And if you have anything you'd like to share and you're one of our network, and you could present on what you've done around AI, or if you have any experience, then please get in touch because we'd like to hear from you. Otherwise, I will give you 1 minute back of your life and say, for you, those of you that are coming, see you on the 4th of July, where we will hopefully be able to source some people to talk about AI. Otherwise, thank you to our experts, thank you to our panel, thank you to Anna, and see you all soon.